Well, welcome everybody. This is our second in-person talk and our second talk using our new audiovisual equipment. And of course, as it seems the nature of audiovisual equipment, everything was working perfectly at quarter after, and then between quarter after and right now, it all went to heck. So thank you for your patience. My name's Kristen Fletcher. I'm the Programs and Community Engagement Manager at the Hailey Public Library. Before I formally introduce Linda, I wanted to thank John Plummer, who's managing the AV equipment right now and set everything up, has guided us through this, and also Josh Crotty, who is our tech person at the library, who is helping us set that up as well. We will be recording this. I'll be doing a little bit of editing, and it will be posted on our website in our archive section, which is where all of our programs for the last 2 years have been archived. So if you're interested in anything that we've done, just go there, click on it, and you'll get to watch it. And tonight, for the first time, we're streaming it live on YouTube as well. So that was, we couldn't get it to work last week, and this week we were able to, so that's pretty cool. I always like to feature a book that we have in our collections at the library, and this one comes highly recommended. It's the American Horticultural Society Pruning and Training book. It's fully illustrated. It goes plant by plant. You can learn how to espalier. You can learn how to...
it's going to be on the resource list.
And it'll be on Linda's resource list.
Yes, so you don't have to write it down.
Yeah, but it's a great, great book. I checked it out a couple times from the library and just went ahead and bought my own copy. So tonight's workshop presenter is arborist Linda Ries, and she will talk to us about the art of fruit tree pruning. Linda has a BS in forest biology from Colorado State University and has been a certified arborist with the International Society of Arboriculture since 1996. She has served on the City of Hailey Tree Committee since 2015 and is currently the chair. She is the former community forester for the Sawtooth National Forest and was the Conservation Education Coordinator for the U.S. Forest Service's Intermountain region based in Ogden. In 1996, Linda established the Native Plant Arboretum, now overseen by the City of Hailey. And if you don't know quite where that is, it's right at the intersection of the BCRD bike path and Fox Acre Road, right behind the auto parts store. It's got a wonderful winding trail, lots of different varieties, species of trees, different kinds of grasses and wildflowers, and it's really a hidden treasure. A lot of people don't know about it. So without further ado, please join me in welcoming Linda Ries. Thank you, Linda.
Thank you, Kristen. I just wanted to tell you guys, I so appreciate you coming out, and if some of you were online in February, I apologize. Cox. We had a bad connection. I lost it like 4 times, and it was not fun. So I'm glad someone else is managing this tonight. So I just wanted to start with saying, and just my disclaimer is, I am more comfortable in pruning shade trees. We had someone else in mind to do this presentation, but sometimes, you know, when you have to do a presentation, you learn a lot. So. And I just want to invite you guys, if you're able to come next Wednesday the 30th at 4 o'clock at Colorado Gulch. The Wood River Land Trust has a new orchard, and so we're going to go over there, and Kelsey Paxson, who's a new tree committee member and a certified arborist and comfortable with fruit trees, is going to do a demo. So if you're able to come, that would be great. So I'm just going to get started, and one thing I think is really interesting about fruit trees is there's a lot of similarities to knowing, you know, shade trees versus fruit trees. So there's some things you need to know that are good for both. But fruit trees, it is very different because you have a certain goal, which is, of course, producing fruit. And so, yeah, part of it's the science, part of it's the art, and part of it is, of course, like a lot of things, experience. Let's see if this works. All right. So tonight, we're not going to be able to cover everything. We're not going to be able to cover planting and a lot of exotic styles of pruning your trees, just so you know. But we're going to just kind of do some of the basics, and I think that's really important. And so when we get into like anatomy, I think it's really important to have a feeling for where certain buds are, and that will help you with pruning. So we're going to go and kind of go through this and hopefully get through all this list. So most of the fruit trees you buy have been grafted. And the reason for that graft is the rootstock, and you can see, oops, I can use this. Let's see if this works. Right there, there's the graft union, and the rootstock's down here, and the top part is I believe it's scion. Is that right, Kristen? Is that how you say it? Scion, yes. And so that's the part that determines what type of fruit you're going to have. But the rootstock is what gives that tree some hardiness. And the important thing, I'll just make it real quick, but when you're planting a fruit tree, don't bury that graft union. There's a little bulge. Make sure that's above the ground. Sometimes it depends on the tree. You might even get suckers that come out of the rootstock, and you want to remove those, just saying, because that's an important piece. Oops. And this is just an illustration of how they do a grafting. And we're not going to get into that, but I just thought I'd show you basically what they have done. They've taken, for the scion, the top piece and made a really sharp cut, and then basically then put it into the rootstock and wrap it with a rubber band or some tape. And what's the difference? So sometimes you can go and buy just plain seedlings that haven't been grafted and, you know, do your own thing. The only thing about that is it's a lot harder to know what you're going to get. Grafted trees, it's a lot more definitive what type of fruit you're going to get. But it's a cheap way to go. All right, and one thing you need to know when you've bought a tree, remember to I always like to keep my tags, because then you know what type of tree it was, what cultivar, but also knowing what size that tree is supposed to be. So the old style, like in the orchards, a lot of the orchards have the standard size trees because they're producing so much. So you're going to prune those different than you would if you bought a dwarf or semi-dwarf. So I'll just ask, have you guys bought more of the semi-dwarf or dwarf trees? What do you have in your yard? Do you know? Yes. Okay. Dwarf. Okay, and so one of the things you have to remember on the dwarf trees is, and we get to it like a little bit later, we'll talk about it again, but you don't want to lift the lower branches too much, because those are going to be part of your fruiting part of the tree. So, and you do need to prune those more often. I mean, you don't want to remove a lot of those lower branches.
You don't want to remove them. Okay. How do you know if you have a dwarf? Sorry, just roughly.
Well, if you didn't buy it,
I bought it.
you bought it, it should be on the tag.
Don't have it.
Well,
A million years ago, 25 years ago.
oh, okay.
Big tree.
Big tree? I don't know. I don't know. I think it depends. I don't know if I can tell you that.
If the moose can reach it way up high, is that a dwarf?
Probably not. Probably not. Maybe that's growing because of the moose that way. I don't know. I can't answer that without knowing. Sometimes if do you know the species or you know the cultivar? So then you can talk to the nursery and see what they think. So one of the things we're going to talk about a lot tonight is the type of buds. And we're not going to get into a lot of other types of buds, mostly the leaf bud versus the flower bud. And so, well, we're going to go over here. I'm sorry this was kind of cut off. So, so the leaf buds are right, there's some here, and we'll talk about it later, but usually the flower buds are much bigger. Depends on the species of tree. Sometimes they're not real obvious. And some of the trees will have like leaf buds that are smaller and the flower bud and the tip, or sometimes you'll have flower buds along the way. On this slide, I just wanted to show you something that we're going to be looking at because it does help you with pruning. Okay, so here's the terminal bud, and if you go down, see this little ring right here? Do you guys know what that means? When you have a ring all the way around. Yes. Yeah, that shows how much it grew in a year. And that's really important to know because it depends on your type of tree. So you need to know how much you grew in a year. That helps you with your pruning. And so on that tree, then you go down, there's another ring here. So that was 2 years growth from the top to here. Okay, and we'll have some examples we'll pass around a little bit. So those are the most important parts for right now. All right. And just again, it's kind of the same thing. It's, whoops, too quick. I was doing my button wrong here. So again, the terminal bud, and then sometimes what will happen, like see that big fat bud right there? So that's a flower bud. Some flowers will have like some kind of almost downy looking on the outside of the bud. Usually, the leaf buds are narrow and pointed and maybe more tight to the stem. And the other terms that we need to know is, okay, so we have the leaf or the growth buds, and they become the shoots. All the vegetative growth comes from the leaf buds. So they'll extend, and the shoots eventually will become the branches. And terminals are whatever's at the very top. This one has actually been removed, but that would be where the terminal growth is, and the leader. And laterals are the ones that will come out more to the side of the main stem. And a scaffold is what you want to develop with time when you're pruning to make some of those laterals will become a larger branch. So, and having a strong branch is really important. And then we'll get into spurs. And actually, I'll go ahead and pass this around, so I think this will be helpful. So this is, I don't know if you can see that. So I'm going to pass around, this is from an apricot tree. And what it shows is the development on the side of what are called spurs. Apple trees have spurs too, but those are important because that's where your flower buds are. Let's see, I have another one here. And this one is an example of, that work? Down.
It's better if it's down. It's better if you just hold it still for a moment. Okay.
All right, and I'll start this one over here. So this is an example of an apple spur, and you can see there's a short spur and then a little bit longer spur, so that might have been a 2-year spur. And then Jim Reinhold brought one in. This is a pear. I don't have a tag on it, but I can put it right here. Better not look there. It's bright. Okay, and so the same thing. So look at that, and you will see, again, the spur development, and these are all flower buds on the side, on these short little stems. And you can look, and there's just some really small buds, and those are all leaf buds.
I have a question.
Yes.
Can I ask a question?
Yes.
So a spur is a shoot. Does the spur show up first or the flower bud? Looks like the flower bud shows
The
up.
flower bud first.
And then it grows out into a spur.
Yeah. And there's certain types of, like the apples and pears are known as pome trees, pome fruit. And they definitely, I mean, there's other trees fruit trees that have spurs, but those two have very distinct spurs. So I can't remember what the next one is. Let's see what the next one is. Okay, here we go. This is a little more helpful. So you can see on the left, there's a leaf bud, and it's kind of, oh, that's not right. It says both. Okay. So sometimes what you have is you'll have the flower bud and then a little leaf bud right below it. And then the next one over is, see how it's elongated, but it has that bunching of large buds. So those are fruit buds. And then as it gets older on this apple tree, they get little, they're crooked little stems. And that's how you know it's a spur. And those are important because that's where you're going to get a lot of production. And this on the other side shows you how you can have multiple buds kind of together, including a leaf bud. And this is just some pictures I found online, but again, it shows you, here's the leaf bud. It's flat and pretty pointy, and this fatter, fuzzier flower bud, and again, another flower bud. And of course, as soon as the buds start opening a little bit, it's always a lot easier to see. And I was reading about it, I thought it was really interesting. A lot of people that prune peach trees professionally, they actually wait until they're kind of open so that they know what they're pruning off. And just some more very obvious little spurs here. Kind of gives you an idea. There's some other stuff going on there, but most I was just trying to show you the spurs. And another one. I mean, it takes a little getting used to, but once you figure that out, there's a different, the stem thickens differently than just a traditional little branch. And so when you're pruning, one thing to keep in mind is if you have more horizontal branches, those buds are often more likely to become fruit buds. If you have a lot of growth straight up, those buds are most likely, not always, going to be leaf buds. So in pruning, keep in mind, it's not beneficial to the tree to have a lot of extra vertical. Okay, and so, and this is just a little bit about where the fruit is produced. So apples, pears, European plums, which I don't know if they're planted here much, but so again, they're on those short branches. And remember, you're going to learn how to age a tree or age a branch by looking for that bud scar around it, so you can figure out how old the stems are. Another way to figure out the age of the trees, besides looking for that, is usually, I think I had one that was pretty good, but, oh yeah, here we go. Well, it's not super distinct, but this is from an apple tree there's a couple things going on this. It was either browsed by an animal or broke off sometimes, so the top of this branch doesn't look good because it's dead. It has some fungus, some canker going on it. But I want you to look at when you see this is look for a change of color. So the previous season wood will have usually a brighter color, and that's an easier way to tell. Sometimes those little circular scars are hard to find. And I think this one only has, I don't think I got down to the next one. So this one only has like 2 years on it. Did everyone get to see this little guy? So again, keeping in mind, it's really important on those, like say the apple trees, that you don't prune off your older wood with, especially with those spurs. And the one time you might change that is apples after several years, those spurs aren't very productive, and you can kind of thin out. Whatever looks kind of old, you can take some of them out and leave some of the others. And on pear trees, they will actually fruit a little earlier than the apples, but again on the spurs. There are spurs on some of these other trees, but the most important thing on this list is if you have a peach tree, I don't know if anyone has nectarines here, but they would be the same. They fruit on 1-year-old wood. So you have to be really careful what you leave on the tree and how you prune.
Only the 1-year-old?
Mm-hmm. So you have to keep pruning it. And so one of the things when you're pruning fruit trees is sometimes you're pruning in the winter for that season's fruit. And sometimes you're pruning for the future. So peaches always have to have a little trim to keep new growth coming. And one of the things we'll really get to see if you come on the 30th is the Wood River Land Trust. Their trees are all pretty small, and they're ready. They're really ready for a training prune. And a training prune is not something you do just once. It's going to be over a period of time. So now their trees are, they're actually pretty big. So this is just if you started with a little tiny tree. If you're starting with they call it the whip, if it just has like mostly one stem, and you do your first prune, what you want to do is you want to cut it where you want your first branches to start. But most of you probably already have a tree that's bigger. So then what you're doing is even with a young tree, you're looking to find the best branches. They're going to be nice and strong. And the reason that we might prune older trees is, probably every year you should look at your fruit trees. They might be still fruiting really well, but look for broken branches, crossing limbs, anything that's damaged and anything's dead, and make sure you remove those first. And removing suckers and water sprouts. And we'll talk later about when you can do that. You don't have to do that all in the winter. And trees, if you're going to have fruit, you have to think about fruit they need light. The blooms need light, and it's healthier for the tree to get light into the inside of the tree. All right, I saw this just today. I thought it was pretty good. So, again, prune first, anything dead, diseased, damaged, and think about distance. In other words, this is actually a currant, but I kind of like it because it's kind of cool. It shows how you can have, you really want branches to go out all directions and alternate up and down a tree. Now, if you were going to build space for, developing branches, current branches never get really thick. So at the minimum, you want to space branches about 6 inches apart. So as they get larger, there's space for them. And then just a couple other tips. I forgot to bring them in, but so make sure you know not to leave any stubs on your branch when you're cutting. Don't cut inside the branch collar, but outside of it. Don't paint the wounds. And when you're making cuts, like a small cut, make sure it's slanted. And using good pruners. And you can clean pruners in different ways, but you can use alcohol or like a bleach solution. That's really important so you're not spreading like a fungus or some kind of disease problem to another branch.
I have a question.
Yep.
So I'm off the tree to Fire Blight, so I'm very worried about it. And I have some trees that are in a weird wind pattern, so they could be susceptible. So I would much rather use alcohol than Clorox. Will alcohol?
Okay. For fire blight, the best thing is you prune them in the winter. If you prune them in the winter, that's huge. If you wait until the summer,
What is winter?
when it's still dormant.
Okay.
When the tree is dormant.
So it doesn't have to be frigid.
No.
It has to be before it starts budding.
Right. And with fire blight, so it's a bacteria, and I don't even know if they sell it anymore. We had 20 apple trees when we lived in South Dakota, and you can get oh shoot, now I'm going to forget the name of the bactericide, but you can do that. The problem with fire blight is, so sanitation is your first key.
It's extremely contagious.
And what I didn't realize, unfortunately, guess who spreads fire blight? Bud to bud, flower bud to bees. So we were on top of our old trees, and then we realized the next year, like every end of every branch was like, and I thought, what happened? So it was the bees. So it's just a process. It takes a lot of time. So you guys know about fire blight? So yeah, so it's in all the apple and
Yeah, all the homes, basically.
yeah.
So back to my original question. To the best of your knowledge, will alcohol kill it? If you clean your...
Well, I think it will help. Yes, I think it will help.
Okay.
Yeah, it should. Yes, but I do know that they say if you're pruning in the winter, it's not active.
Oh, good. Okay.
So, but if you prune in the summer, you have to go back a foot into live tissue and prune it, because it's in fire blight it's already gone into the tissue in the summer. So, but yeah, it's not fun. All right. Okay. And then just a couple. These are just common things with any tree you're pruning, but especially with fruit trees, you're going to have a lot of weight on your branches. So one of the first things you want to look at on your tree is to make sure you don't have any what they call codominant stems with that very tight fork or crotch there. And the strongest connection on, this says 45 to 60, but actually 45 to almost 90 works for fruit trees on the right. And the reason is over here you have included bark, so it's a very weak connection. And plus, as they get larger, there's no space for that. And here, there's special tissue, and it's actually a very strong connection. And this is kind of the same thing again, looking for angles of the branches that are nice and wide. And there's two types of cuts that you can use on fruit trees, and you I wouldn't use heading cut ever on a shade tree. Maybe someone would. But so heading and thinning, and it's very basic what the difference is. Just think, thinning removes the whole branch or the whole shoot. So you'll remove it down to wherever it's connected with another branch. And when you do that, when you use thinning, it's nice to use thinning cuts on the middle of the tree. You open up the tree to light, and also use it to remove anything that you've got issues with crossing branches, there's not enough space. So those would be the times you use thinning. And then a heading cut is any time you take a branch and you just go, yeah, I think I'm going to cut that right here. So anytime you don't remove the whole thing, that's a heading cut. And heading cuts you can do different proportions. If you do, like say, if you have a branch and you want to remove about 1/3 of it, then what you'll do is you'll get a lot of growth from the buds below, and you'll create a bushier, kind of a thicker branching pattern. If you go and remove 2/3, then you'll have less of a stem, and you trigger a lot of really leggy type growth, which you don't probably want to do.
Did you say if you go less or more than 2/3?
If you go more than if you go to 2/3, you'll have leggier stuff. Yeah, so if you do a little less, like 1/3, you'll create a little bit bushier, stockier side branches. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Is that it? Okay. All right. And this is just, well, kind of what I said already. So that's, you can create a different situation. And I don't know if I have a slide in here, but as you're heading back, you're always going to still be cutting to a bud, okay? And when you cut to a bud, you have to make sure you're not right on top of that bud or you'll damage it, and you don't want to leave too much, and always on a slant. So here's an example of a heading cut that they're doing, and so they've decided to prune it right here, and see what instead of going, they didn't go like this. See how they're doing that cut? It would be on the slant, and it will heal, as long as they, I don't want to get too close to that, but leaving just a little space. And then, what else? Okay, and then this is what it looks like after you've done that cut. And so you're in the process of actually creating a spur for fruit to be on. And then the next one, before I go past this one, and one thing I wanted to show you is, okay, if you were to make a cut right here, where's your growth going to go? You have this bud. Where's it going to grow? It's going to grow down or up? Right. So when you pick the bud to prune near, if you want a little bit more going up, then that's how you select where you're going to cut. And this is a little hard to see, but it just kind of shows you what happened. Here's the first year, here's when you cut it, and then here's C where you cut it, and here's C down here, and you have a new branch, a new shoot here. And it also, it released this bud here to grow this way. And then it released, here's a little fruit bud that's going to probably make a little spur right here. So you're making that branch more complex. So we know about heading and thinning cuts. So with your trees, it kind of depends on the type of tree you have, how you're going to prune your tree. So a lot of smaller trees, like if you have the dwarf and the semi-dwarf, you're going to do, a lot of them are best to use the central leader, to have one leader. And one thing about central leader is you kind of think about it, it's going to be almost like a Christmas tree. You want these branches to be a little shorter at the top, these down here a little longer. And that's so they can get the light. So that works really well with the smaller trees. And then there's a modified central leader. So what they have done, they've actually removed that straight up and down leader at some point. They probably took it off somewhere, and it has all these other leaders that have grown. And that works well with quite a few trees. And this is one that shows you if you have a type of tree that needs a lot of light in the center. They've almost made it into like a vase. So they've removed, the limbs in here to get more light into it. So yeah, so the single leader, this is a little hard to see because I wish it was more colors, but so this is the tree before they pruned it, and then they made some cuts. And one thing they have done here, which I don't know if any of you have done this, I have not, but they use what is called a spreader. So sometimes when you have a young tree that's, the limbs aren't very big yet, is you can actually use, sometimes they use toothpicks, they use something, some kind of piece of wood to make those limbs open a little bit. And that's, in case you don't have the perfect, branching pattern, so. So this is the central leader again, and apples, pears, you can use it on a lot of trees. And I think one of the advantages to this one is, versus just having a single leader, you have a lot of large branches, scaffold branches, so you have a lot more potential for fruit. And again, this is that open, really open. So if we had more of an issue here with moisture, this would be a good one. It would let not just light in there, but it would let moisture out, so you would have less issues with some of the mildews, molds, but I don't think we have that issue here. In the East, maybe, or other states. And so when is it that you can actually prune? Most of the pruning is done in the dormant season, so anytime before the leaves break. And here being when it's so cold, I don't think it's a good idea to do it when it's really cold, because the limbs are going to just be more brittle. And so I think when the daytime temperatures are getting a little bit warmer, it's a perfect time. What you don't want to do is you don't want to do it too early in the fall, because it kind of could trigger an early, a break, a bud break. So that would probably be the main thing. Also, I thought this was interesting. I didn't know this, that they say don't make any large cuts until the harsh winter temperature is over. And I think, again, it's probably partly because it's just more brittle. And then we'll talk about why you prune in the winter or during dormancy. So that's a perfect time to look at your tree and figure out, look at the structure, look at where the problems are. It's all easy to get to. And you can make all those corrections then. And you will also maybe be able to find, like you might have some of those long shoots, like I said, that go straight up the tree. This one was actually at a base of a tree, so it was like a sucker. I'll pass this around. As you will see, there's nothing on this one except leaf buds on the side. And this was 1 year. So those are usually very weak, and you don't want to keep those. And it takes energy away from the tree. And you can do some pruning in the summer. Mostly you would prune like if there's water sprouts that have started. And sometimes if they're a small sprout, you can break them off with your hand or your fingers. And if you do that, they're less likely to come back and there's less damage. And let's see what else. Oh, and the other thing is sometimes if there's a lot of leafy growth in the middle of your tree shading your fruit, you can go ahead and remove some of that leafy growth. It gets sun to the fruit and it'll help it develop. And I just put this in here just kind of give you an idea of what becomes what. That's kind of cute. All right, so we talked a little bit about apples already. So yes, so they won't fruit unless the wood is at least 2 years old. And I don't think it's very common, but most apple trees bear fruit on spurs, but there's some that are called tip-bearing apples. Does anyone think they have one of those? So Pink Lady I think Pink Lady might be both, have spurs and tip-bearing. So if you had bought a tip-bearing tree, then you have to just remember to be careful about removing the last tips. So they're a little trickier. They're not as commonly sold. Because for one, people don't know how to trim them. And of course, yes?
I have a columnar apple tree.
Yes?
So would that be a tip bearer or more tip? It seems like it's
Maybe.
really close to the central stem.
Yeah, maybe it is. It could be. Yeah, it could be. Yeah, interesting. Yeah, it's a little tricky. I mean, but it's been bearing fine.
Yeah.
Oh, good. Yeah, but it's more upright.
And very slender.
Small.
Huh.
Very short branches.
Yeah.
It's supposed to be very easy to pick the fruit because they're all right there.
So does it have fruit on the side of the branches also, or is it more just on? You know what I mean? Does it have like a main branch, but have like the side branches has the fruit?
Only the side branches have the fruit.
Oh, that's good then. So it's probably a mod of.
It's been a few months since I've seen it.
Oh, okay. Well, it might be the blend, because there's some that are spurs and tip bearing. But all right. And again, the pears. That will have the spurs also. One thing that's nice about pears is they're a little more tolerant to abuse than some fruit trees. And then peaches, again, we talked about this earlier, but again, they'll only bloom or have fruit buds on the youngest shoots. So does anyone have a peach tree? All right. And how are they doing?
The Lions and Contender, and they're doing, yes. But they're relatively young, so I'm still trying to figure out how to prune them correctly. So I've done very little pruning, so of course they're doing good. But I need to master this one. Yeah, so it's good.
So I think, Hannah, is there a peach tree out there? I'm not sure there is. I know there's a pear.
I don't believe so.
Yeah.
I work for the Wood River Land Trust, which is why Linda is asking. From what I understand, what we have currently is apples.
Mm-hmm.
A bunch of apples.
Right.
From what I understand currently, I'm not sure if we have other variations.
You have pear
Do we have? I think
and maybe some cherries.
we have choke cherries, elderberry, apples, and then maybe pear. You might
Okay.
be right. But we should be. I think we're getting more things this year.
Okay. So I think, you know, as far as peaches, again, you can do, you have to think about the future, so you can, you know, make some cuts forming shoots for the next year, but not cut everything off. That's young.
Very careful, yes.
Yes, right.
Very different from apples.
Yeah, right.
So I have a question.
Mm-hmm.
This probably requires more thinking than I'm used to doing. But if peaches only bear on 1 year wood,
Uh-huh.
interesting, because I have a peach tree that had a bunch, very young,
Mm-hmm.
but it had half a dozen, which was pretty good. And then last year, it only had one little peach. And Kelsey's gonna come by, and he's taking care of my trees.
Okay, good.
So hopefully I'll learn something.
Yeah.
But how do I figure out where my 1 year?
Yeah, it's that branch. So you look at the branch and look for that ring all the way around. And so your clue will be, usually the color is different.
Yes.
So the color is different, and then look for that ring all the way around.
So I leave that this year, and then in the fall, how do I prune it? Because I'm gonna prune the ends off, which means I'm going to prune off my next year's 1 year.
Well, what you do is you don't prune everything.
Okay.
So if you prune like half or a third of this year's or this last year's shoots and leave the others.
Okay.
So they should fruit, but you kind of do a cycle. So you,
I was thinking, so if I prune more of the inner things, probably the weaker things,
yeah,
this year, and then next year, hopefully they're a little stronger, and then I prune this year.
It's a different thing.
and yeah, and I would say it would probably be good to spread it around a little bit too.
Exactly.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. So not prune just one, like the outside or the inside, but kind of a little bit. Yeah.
Hey, Linda,
Yes. Yes.
do pears like fruit every other year?
Okay. Well, so we're going to get into why you don't have fruit every year. So I have some slides about that. We'll talk about reasons you don't always have. So how am I doing on time? Huh? Oh, I'm okay. I'm doing okay on time, right? All right. All right. So, and then these are just a couple more. These are, you know, other examples of the stone fruit. And remember, the apricots do have, spurs, but they'll start having fruit on the 1-year-old spurs. And just a little bit more about plums. I don't know how many of you have plums.
I have plums that don't do anything.
They don't do anything?
So sad. So sad.
Maybe the moose needs to be more active. Our neighbor has moose that prunes the plum tree, and it does really well. Takes off just enough, I guess. I don't know. But I think it depends on the type, too. All right. Okay, so we'll still get into why, you know, some trees don't fruit every year and some of those problems. But one thing to think about, and I know people don't like this idea, but if you want to have better fruit, if you have just a whole bunch of, you know, little fruit coming on, it's best to go ahead and thin those. And you'll get bigger fruit and usually better tasting fruit because they can develop a lot better.
Just like a garden.
Yeah, just like a garden, like the carrots. They're so cute.
Carrots.
Yeah, same thing. So that's, you know, that really does help. And then, yes?
You know, a lot of fruit trees, especially apples, have that June thinning on their own.
Yes.
So I always wait and let that happen before I go in and do any thinning, because otherwise,
Yeah, and I read that it's called, what is it, June drop. Yeah, so she's right. So, you know, you definitely, and you probably want to wait until 20, that's probably a little past 21 days here, you know, it could be an issue here. But yes, definitely. So you really can see.
Do all apples do that? Most apples. I don't know all of them, but I know a lot of apple trees, they drop a lot of fruits in June. So wait until that's done, and then you can go in and thin after that. Because if you thin before and then comes the drop, it's like, oops.
I don't have anything. Yeah, that's right. Yeah. Okay, and this is just a slide. It's a little hard to see because I know but it just gives you an idea of the development, you know, the buds during dormancy, and as they just are starting to open up and green up here, and as they develop, and you get that cluster of leaves, and then here comes the fruit or the flower buds opening. And as you know, she said, here's the petal fall after it's bloomed, and the fruit is set. So what Katja was saying is wait until those are kind of a bigger, and just in case they're still dropping.
Those, whatever is left over, there will be a whole bunch dropping in June, because this is way before June.
Mm-hmm. That's a good point. So here's some things that can happen. Tree blooms, but flower parts fall off. And it could be the frost or cold killed those blossoms as they were open. You know, and it's not a whole lot you can do except if you're replacing a tree, is making sure you pick one that is a late bloomer, and consider where you're planting it too. So sometimes you won't have fruit buds form, and remember we talked about the branches that grow up. Those should be removed because they're taking a lot of energy from the tree. Those often have the leaves, and they're sucking energy from the tree, plus shading the other branches that could have the flower buds on them. And also, in case you're fertilizing too much, you don't want too much nitrogen. And instead of doing a really hard dormant pruning, kind of back off. And then you can use a little summer pruning, like if this tree had leaves on it, but you had all these goofy branches, you could still take those off in the summer. And then if you just have fruit buds at the tips, again, your interior branches are maybe too shaded. And so you're getting the buds at the tips because that's where the sun is. So make sure, to keep removing all that really leafy vegetative growth. And this happens a lot. I know that it happened to us when we were in South Dakota, but partly it was we would freeze every third year. But sometimes you have trees that only bear every other year, biennial, have a heavy crop, and then hardly anything the next year. So again, that first year you have that heavy crop. If you thin the fruit, it's not putting as much energy into producing fruit that year. And so it's able to conserve and put energy into the following season. And let's see, so the tree blooms, but the flower parts are falling off. And you might not have any, if you have a tree that needs cross-pollination, you may not have something nearby. The bees aren't finding your tree from another tree. So make sure you have a second or third tree if you need one to cross-pollinate. And I always like to put a plug in for take care of your bees. And make sure you have something nearby. We were talking about this, so it's not just honeybees that we're going to come and help your trees, pollinate your trees, but think about the native bees, specifically mason bees are unbelievable. And they are only out for about 6 weeks, but they're time to come out and pollinate your fruit trees.
What do you call them?
Mason bees. Yeah.
What are the 6 weeks that they're out?
Usually about as soon as it hits around 55 degrees or a little bit more, they come out, and basically it's the same period of time you'll see dandelions and crocus, because they love crocus. So even if the fruit trees aren't quite open, but it's that timing, those early season bulbs. And so they'll come out looking for something. Mason bees don't travel as far as a honeybee to look for pollen, but they're like, I forget it is, 10, 20 times more efficient at pollinating. So, you know, and you do things in your yards, you keep some good litter out in your garden, and, you know, you can always put a mason bee box up, but they've been around a long time. They have this figured out. So just don't keep too tidy a yard. That's the key. And then just one more thing about why you might not get fruit buds. If your tree's under stress, they're not getting enough water, too shady, too wet, droughty, insects. Didn't have it on there, but also if your tree has gotten some fungal decay, that's another reason to be stressed. So a lot of it is things you can do is making sure that you've planted it in the right site, the soil is good, and be careful how you fertilize so you don't add something that has too much nitrogen. All right, and I think that's it that I had. So I can pass these others around. They're kind of similar, if you guys are interested. This one I thought was really interesting. This is a branch. It was kind of growing like this. Here's the horizontal. And so I think these are some of the maybe little spurs that are developing. And then over here, I think these are all going to be leafy. So it just kind of gives you an example of what happens in just one branch. And let's see. Oh, here's just a funny little guy because this one has a little fork here. And so, you know, you wouldn't have to do it right away, but looking for those sort of things, that won't be a very strong connection in the future. All right, I think these others are, this one is just another apple, probably similar to the other one, but you can again see the spurs on this one. I'll start over here. All right. So, you guys have more questions? Yes.
I have money set aside for 3 fruit trees in my yard.
All right. Okay.
So, and I've been trying to figure out what kind I want to plant. I came from fruit country in Washington.
Yes.
Here.
Yes.
So I would love to get the names of, it looks to me, I would really love an apricot.
Mm-hmm.
And I would love to have an apple, maybe 2 apricots and an apple, but then they'd have to be ones that are self-pollinators.
Right. Well, and I don't know if I can do a plug, right? Okay. We're very lucky because we have some great nurseries, and specifically, I think, branching out is very good with fruit trees. Okay. And so they know all that. And I do not profess to know that stuff. So,
I would also say look in your neighborhood because
yes.
if someone has an apricot 2 doors down, you don't necessarily need to get 2 apricots.
That's right.
So like as long as certain trees are within, I think an apple is like a mile. I think apricots are a little
Yeah.
closer, but you don't necessarily have
That's true.
to get the pollinator if somebody in your neighborhood that
Right.
has one. So
Yeah.
it's good to kind of look around and see what people have too. Yeah, well, anything that needs to be cross-pollinated, the tree doesn't have to be 10 feet next to it. It can be within 400 feet, half a mile, depending on, yeah. So I think that might just make you probably figure out, I don't know the exact distances, but I do know that that is, possible. Because I know in my neighborhood, there's a lot of fruit trees, so if I wanted something, I wouldn't have to necessarily get 2 of it. So, yeah.
That's an excellent point.
I think for apples, I think that's really common. We have a lot of apple trees. So that's very easy to just plant one apple. And for the apricots, let me tell you, I've pretty much grown them all. And there's only one for our area, it's the Chinese. For this climate, zone 3, and self-pollinating too.
Oh, excellent. Yeah, I might end
Thank
up
you,
with
Katja.
those.
So good to have experts.
Variety, you don't
Yeah.
have 2 plums, just, if you can have just one plum and an apricot and an apple, you have much more variety.
Yes. Is it a prune plum? This
Royal is a plum.
is a plum. Okay.
It's not a European.
Yes,
And be sure, this makes perfect sense, but I didn't know it.
yes.
Not all apples pollinate, they have to bloom at the same
Yes.
time. So you need to talk to, either get online and find out what pollinates each other, or talk to your
Oh,
your
right,
nursery.
right.
Or see what you have next
Yeah,
door.
that's very good. Yes,
It's next door, as long as they
yes,
bloom at the same time.
Linda,
yes.
how is the best, what would you suggest, like, for fertilization on trees? Is there specific trees need specific things, or is there a general, kind of a general?
Kristen, what do you use for? Yeah, I don't think for the most part you need to do too much. I think the main thing is whatever, if you put anything down, just don't pick anything that has a lot of nitrogen.
Okay.
Because you just totally mess up the tree. I mean, I think, I don't think, we don't have the best soil here, but if you use some compost and you make sure, it's, especially before you plant the tree, that it's been dug up and mixed, I don't think you really have to worry too much.
Elk and moose poop are probably.
Oh yeah, I think that's great. You want some more? Yes.
I do a lot of compost, that's all I do.
Oh, do you?
Yeah.
Yes, I do compost, my own compost, that way I know what's in it, and just dump it in there, and that's good. It's really good.
Okay.
And it's good, it's actually good for the roots because they're going to grow a lot better if you have compost in the soil. And it retains moisture too, so.
How about spraying the actual trees?
Spraying the trees
Yeah.
for bugs.
Yeah,
I don't know that much here if there's that much of an issue. I know apples, when we lived in South Dakota, it was a real issue. But in South Dakota, we never sprayed them because we lucked out and we had a freeze every 3rd year. And so we were just using them for cooking. We cut around the worms or we made cider. So, I think it's really tricky to make sure, and I think it'd probably be best to ask a professional to do that. But timing is really critical because first you want, if you have an insect that's a problem, you want to nail it at the right time. But by spraying it, then you're killing all the beneficials too.
so it's not necessarily something you do every year for maintenance?
For aphids?
No maintenance?
Oh, no, I wouldn't. No. And there's some things you can do, like if you have aphids, you can do some like horticultural oils, or you can do things that are low key if that's an issue.
If you have aphid problems, you can work with soap, do it with soap water, spray them, that works. For ladybugs.
Just even squirting them with water is amazing. It's amazing what you can blast off.
A lot of aphids, they don't
Yeah.
just hose the tree down with water.
And if you're growing your own fruit, I think to me, part of it is knowing what's on that fruit. So not adding to what, making it, knowing it's good to eat. So.
It's so funny, we have these amazing pear trees right next to each other, which is right next to our compost pile. That makes a lot of compost naturally. But the bees and insects eat the pears. Like there's
Oh, yeah.
chew marks in every pear, and I just think it's humorous. I don't worry about it. But it
So-
definitely have massive producing every other year, and then the next year it's
So is it mostly,
really,
wasp?
yep.
Yeah, so if you hung up some traps, wasp traps, with that, it might coax them away. And I know if you let anything fall on the ground, they love that too. So, yeah, you have to kind of keep it cleaned up.
Or keep some on the ground so they'll eat those. I don't know.
Yeah. Yes.
So I did talk to Kelsey,
Uh-huh.
and I'm totally organic. And I said, and I was worried that I got 8 baby fruit trees, and so I was worried about it. And I had one apple that had a whole bunch of fruit one year, and the next year it had a whole bunch of bugs. It fell down with all the fruit. And I said, so what should I do about this? And he said, you know what? It's cyclical.
Yeah.
It just happens.
Yeah,
And he said, next year they'll probably be fine.
right.
So he really was not big on doing a whole, exactly.
Well, there's a lot of natural predators, so, again, with the cycles, so sometimes if they build up one year, those predators find them. And they might have enough to kind of knock it down too. So that was a good point, I like that. All right, anything else? So I have we have a resource sheet. Let's start some over here. Yes, and so the book that Kristen showed you earlier is on the top there, and it really is good. And then the second one was pretty good too. And then I put a bunch of links in there, so if you if you want, we can email you those links too. So if we can get your name or email, and we can send that to you, so you don't have to type it all in. And again, if you're interested in coming, so Hannah from the Wood River Land Trust is, she's looking for people to make a sign up, so we kind of know how many people are going to come next week on Wednesday. And it will be at the Colorado Gulch Orchard off of Red Feather Way.
Red Feather Lane.
Oh, Red Feather Lane. I put way somewhere. All right, okay. And it's off of Bradford, so it's just west off of Bradford.
It's from 4 to 6. Yeah.
And it's from 4 to 6? It's a pruning demo?
Yeah, pruning demo. And Kelsey's going to do the demo. There might be a little guided, hands-on, but mostly he's kind of going to go through it. And I think it'll be great because those trees are just perfect.
We need
So it's a good chance.
learning from the expert.
Yeah.
It's from 4 to 6. Yes. We do have it on our website. We do have it on there. So there's more information there. And then if you need help with directions, I can do that.
And there's a small parking area, but then also like along the road, there's probably some parking. It's kind of a new subdivision.
Well, thanks for coming, everybody. Sure appreciate it. Thanks very much, Linda, for an interesting talk. And I just wanted to remind you all that this talk will be lightly edited and uploaded to the Hailey Public Library website. You just go to www.haileypubliclibrary.org, look for program events and pages, and then scroll down to program archives. It's really easy to find. So, yeah, so thanks to you all for coming. Really appreciate it.